All right, welcome everybody. We'll kind of sit tight here for a second while people keep on rolling in, but appreciate everybody joining us this morning. All right, I kind of think the participants list is probably just going to keep on populating, so we'll go ahead and just get started. Again, appreciate everybody for joining us this morning. I am not Mitchell Hora, and neither is Carolyn, so we'll get into that in a little bit here with some introductions. But I want to, and then we'll answer some questions that we've had come in throughout the week, as well as some other questions, and maybe talk a little bit about our products that Carolyn and I support. But before we get into that stuff, I just want to give the quick rundown on the basics of carbon intensity and CI that we're talking about today, because I think that's generally what we do here. So we want to make sure everybody is sort of on the same level 101 playing field here. So carbon intensity, CI is what we like to shorten it to a lot of times, is just the measurement of the carbon footprint of the crops that we grow here in the farming community. And in this particular situation that we're getting into a lot, it's those crops going into the creation of biofuels. So carbon intensity is measured in grams of GHG equivalent, so greenhouse gas equivalents per bushel for corn, and then you can kind of or soybeans, and you can kind of transition that into per megajoule once it gets into the supply chain for biofuels and such. But it's really just documenting the data, and so that we can understand and have some proof of what the practices are that are used to grow the crops that we're growing, and get a tangible idea of what the carbon footprint is that was the impact on the environment to grow those crops, and then keep that tied to those crops as they go through the supply chain and ultimately be monetizable with the crop rather than separate from the crop. And the reason that we talk a lot about the biofuel industry when we're talking about CI is just because of the Inflation Reduction Act that was passed a little while back, and the creation of the 45Z tax credit. And that's incentivizing biofuel plants, ethanol plants, biodiesel plants, sustainable aviation fuel plants, all those different guys to produce their product, their fuel, in a more carbon footprint friendly way. And this whole concept of carbon intensity is sort of the way that was decided to be scored. So that's kind of our cold intro right there. I'll go ahead and let Carolyn introduce herself, and then I'll circle around and introduce myself as well.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Good job, Justin. We're channeling our inner Mitchell this morning. So hopefully he listens to this later and is very proud that we sounded just like him. But yeah, my name is Carolyn King. I am the VP of Operations here at Continuum Ag. I've been with Continuum for just over 3 years now, on the agronomy side the entire time, but definitely in a couple of different roles as Continuum has grown and changed and become a very different company than it was started. But I grew up on my family's farm in Western Illinois. My family has been doing soil health practice for a long time, so I had a pretty early start into the soil health world, and then got my bachelor's degree in agronomy from Iowa State, and just finished my master's in agronomy there as well. So definitely on the agronomy side. But Justin, let's first time on the CI Chit Chat, and you have to host.
Just another day in the life. Yeah, so I'm Justin Freyenberger, and as Carolyn said, we're going to do our best Mitchell impressions, but we have a lot of Mitchell-isms that we could drop in here, but we don't want to scar you guys so we'll try not to do that too much. But so I'm the VP of Product Development here at Continuum Ag. I've been here for just a few days over a year at this point, but much like Carolyn, in that short amount of time, I have worn a lot of different hats, communicated directly with a lot of customers, and slowly kind of backed away from that and into more of the software development side of what we do, and managing a lot of those things. And prior to working at Continuum, I worked for CNH Industrial for 6 years in our software development group there, gained a lot of valuable experience. And Even prior to that, I went to Iowa State and got an ag engineering degree, and a lot of experience working on working for a family friend's farm in the area here. I'm from Southeast Iowa as well, close to Continuum Ag World headquarters. So it's a little bit on Carolyn and I, but got a few questions that rolled in this week that we want to make sure that we address. And so we'll go ahead and head right into that. And if you guys have other questions that you'd like to talk about, just put them into the chat. We'll do our best to keep up with those and answer them. And I can't promise the perfect results, but we'll certainly try. So first question comes from Josh Nelson. Josh is pretty in tune with what's going on with this stuff. He's Continuum Ag dealer, so definitely hit up Josh if you have some questions in his area there in north central Iowa. But his question is, how close will a lot of ethanol plants be to being eligible for CI tax credits? A local farmer friend of his who was heavily involved in the industry told him there was only going to be one plant in Iowa below a 50 CI and would likely only get to 29 using low carbon corn alone. Said after the low hanging fruit is addressed, it's $1 million to $4 million of capital expenditure per point reduction. Carolyn, do you have thoughts on how to answer that question?
Yeah, Josh, you asked a really hard question on the week that Mitchell's not here, so
I appreciate you, Josh.
yeah, what's that all about? But yeah, I mean, I think a couple different things to note here. The average ethanol plant in Iowa, the average CI score is a 55. So they're not far off already, but obviously like do have a ways to go before they make some really substantial improvements. I think that just really shows that this is super important on the farmer side of things, that we can have an even bigger impact than maybe what we originally thought. The corn that goes into ethanol production makes up 29 of those 50 points that the ethanol plant needs to get to or below. So, you know, I mean, like I said, it can be a really, really big impact from the farmer side of things. That's where the farmer themselves having a lower CI score makes a bigger impact too. We don't want you to just be at a 20 or a 25. We'd love to get you down to a 0. That makes it, you know, a little bit better on the ethanol plant, that your grain has a bigger value to them. And then of course to your side too, that the lower you are, the higher premium you can earn. So I think I'm optimistic. I think it's definitely possible, especially knowing that like I said, the average CI score of a plant in Iowa is 55. Of course, some are higher and some are lower, but they're going to have to figure it out. It's a good way for them to make some extra money and to reward farmers for doing better practices. So I don't see a reason why not to do it.
Yeah, and a little bit more of the number side of Josh's question here too, just so everybody kind of understands how this works from a numbers perspective. So the why Josh mentions the 50 CI is that's sort of the magic point where once a biofuel plant gets below 50, that's when they start earning these tax credits. So from 50 down to 0, and that's the carbon intensity score of the gallons of fuel that they produce. So for their plant as a whole. And once they get below 50 all the way down to 0, they are going to earn 2 cents per gallon of fuel produced per CI point drop. So if they're able to get themselves below 50 from 50 down to 40, you know, that's 10 CI points. So that's going to be 20 cents per gallon of fuel that they produce. I think that I looked it up. The average ethanol plant in Iowa, for example, does like 100 million gallons per year. So, I mean, we're talking pretty significant money. So Josh's other side of that question is, you know, if it's going to cost them $1 to $4 million of capital expenditure per point reduction. I'm not 100% sure what those numbers are. That's definitely more of a Mitchell expertise area. But you know, that's even in Josh's example there, if they can get from 50 down to 29 just using the you know, lowering the carbon intensity of their corn that they're using to feed their plants, that's that's $42 million in tax credits that they can earn. And so if it is costing them $1 million per point reduction, then we're still talking $21 million of expenditures. And there's a lot of meat in the bone there. If it's $4 million in expenditures to get there, then obviously that doesn't math out too well. But I know that we have a lot of resources that we use to when we were talking to ethanol plants, which Mitchell and some of our other sales team do quite a bit, that they have this actually modeled out pretty well, and we have a pretty good grasp on those numbers. I just don't have that grasp, and I don't think Carolyn does either. So sorry, Josh. Get about half of your answer. Okay, so that's question number 1 from Josh. And I see he's got another one in the chat, so we'll get to that one. We've got a few others that rolled in during the week that we want to make sure that we talk about. So another question that came in was, how do we go forward marketing our corn to an ethanol plant? Carolyn, I'll let you take a crack at it, and then I can always fill in too.
Yeah, this one's definitely more within my pay grade. So, I mean, our big suggestion right now is to start calling the ethanol plants and bring us in. When you need some extra help communicating what you're trying to do. The big piece of that is right now what we found is a lot of people at the local level don't really know what is going on with 45Z. They might have heard about it, but they're not sure what their specific plant is going to do about it yet. So they might not have your answer. We've heard a couple times that there's been a few people that have said they aren't doing that, or don't know, what we're even talking about. Don't take that as discouraging. The big reason for that is because it is coming from a higher level right now. The CEOs, CFOs need to figure out how they want to handle this before it really gets trickled down, and everybody is aware of how it works at that specific plant. But we are waiting on some new rules from the IRS. They're supposed to be coming in March. Hopefully that is true. But we do think that that'll bring some additional clarity for these ethanol plants, and they'll really be able to lock down exactly what they're looking for. I think the big thing right now is just be patient with them, help educate them, help educate your neighbors and other people in your area. The more farmer awareness we have about this, the more likely it goes well.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, if you're just be patient. Things are happening. Things are happening. Might not be super visible in the everyday life for most of us, but be patient, and it's gonna work out. Don't worry. That's what Mitchell tells us, at least. All right. And next question is, so this is from Andy Bensend, and he's asking, in our opinion, since we're talking about commodities, will arbitrage be allowed to take advantage of the best potential markets? Secondly, that's question number 1. And then secondly, what impact on the CI score does putting cover crop before the subsequent crop versus after the prior crop in your scoring process? Carolyn, do you want to try to take on both of those, or one and I can handle the other?
I think you should try the first part of the question.
Okay. So I actually saw this question. I was like, ooh, this is fun stuff. This is what I get excited about is commodity markets and economics and stuff. But great question, Andy. I think it'll be super interesting to see how this develops. I think long term, this is stuff that this carbon intensity value of a crop does get built into our commodity brokerage systems and in the markets and stuff. I have said for a long time, to me, it makes a lot of sense for these these CI premiums to kind of work a little bit like a basis. If I'm an ethanol plant that needs low CI corn, I'm willing to give up more of the CI tax premium that I'm getting from the tax credits in order to incentivize farmers to bring their low CI corn to me. To me, that makes a lot of sense. I have no idea if that's how things will actually play out here. It's just we have a lot of feed mills in the area, and we have a lot of guys that are feed mills that are they have to feed a lot of pigs, and so you have basis comes into play a lot around here versus the river's also not too far away. And that basis number impacts how corn moves around to the different places in our area, at least by a lot. And so it just kind of makes sense to me that that would be a model that would kind of be followed for this whole CI premium thing too. But I know that there's been conversations that have been had with CIH and some of those areas on how could this potentially, I mean, nothing serious conversations, but how could this potentially be worked into the markets as we know them to make more of a laissez-faire market, I guess you could say, that is all about finding the proper price for these commodities now that there's a CI premium involved. I think there's, like I said, long ways to go before that is realized. I mean, we're in the infancy stages of building this thing, but the key is there's a lot of money to be had, and money tends to drive things to happen. So that's my viewpoint on the first part of the question, at least. Carolyn, I'll let you take the second part of that question.
Yeah, I think to the first part, we just mentioned that the IRS is supposed to be coming out with some rules in March, which is not too far away. That will hopefully really help clear a lot of this stuff up on what exactly does it look like and how is it even going to work. But the second part of the question, so what impact on the CI score does putting the cover crop before the subsequent crop versus after the prior crop in your scoring process? So the scoring process, to speak to that piece a little bit, the process that we use is the GREET model. It was developed by the Department of Energy. We anticipate again in March when these rules come out that it will be the model that is named to be used for the CI scoring process. The reason we're pretty confident about that is because the GREET model was named for scoring sustainable aviation fuel. So it's what we expect to be used. It's what we use in topsoil to quantify your CI scores. So that's the model that's giving you these numbers. So within that model, how does cover crop have an impact? So it would be the cover crop that is ahead of the cash crop that we're getting a CI score on. So if you planted, say, cereal rye this last fall, that would count toward the 2024 crop in the GREET model. You won't be able to count the cover crop after harvest. That goes on to the next crop year. Pretty much all of these models work in a harvest to harvest type time frame. So anything that happens after harvest of 2023 is the 2024 crop. And then that 2024 crop closes with harvest in 2024. So you have to plant a cover crop ahead in order for it to count. And it does drop the score pretty significantly. I think we see like an average of maybe 10 points if you add a cover crop is how much it drops your score. So it has a pretty big impact. I would definitely say be thinking about that moving into the next crop year on how do you get a cover crop into that rotation to take even more advantage of this.
Yeah, great answer, Carolyn. Got another one for you here, Carolyn. This is from Keith Floverine, and he said he shared this info with a few neighbors. However, at what point does this not affect a grower? If they don't use cover crops, they do tillage and use anhydrous, is there really any point in calculating a score?
Yeah, so I still think there is an argument for at least getting your CI score and seeing what that number is. The baseline that you have to be beneath is a 29. What we've found as we've been running scores all over the place is that even with some of these more conventional type practices, you're still below that 29 number. Now you might only be at a 25 or a 26, but it still could have an impact. The big thing with this though is that once you add the cover crops and do some more soil health type practices, your number drops pretty significantly. So that's where you're in the money. But that's why we have just the CI score that we sell too. If you don't know whether you have a very good score, you're a pretty conventional farmer, it might be worth jumping onto topsoil and just getting the score by itself so that you can see where you're at. And then from there, you can gauge, is this something I want to pursue harder with my current practices? Do I want to maybe try to get a game plan for the following year and jump on the bandwagon for 2025? But I think just having that information gives you a good opportunity to figure out what your opportunity even is.
So Carolyn, if I go on topsoil and I see my CI score and it's like a 25, so I'm in the money, but I'm not really killing it yet. But man, do I see the opportunity here, and I'd really like to do CI certification, but I want to figure out how to do a lower number. What can your team do to help
Yeah.
me?
Yeah, so that's where our regen roadmap comes into play. That was one of the first products with Continuum Ag, before all this CI certification stuff. Essentially, the regen roadmap is our regenerative or soil health consulting. So what we do with that product is help farmers implement these practices. So yeah, if you jump on topsoil and you say, man, my score is a 25, I would love to get it down more so that I can tap into this opportunity even further. We can help you with the regen roadmap to make those cover crop, reduce tillage, type decisions and help you be successful at it. I know a lot of people, especially planting cover crops ahead of corn, can be really scary. But the good news is we've got a bunch of agronomists on my team who have plenty of experience with guiding people through that process, and most of them with doing it themselves on their own farms. So we're confident that we can help you do it and help lower your CI score in the process. If you do CI certification by itself, it's $5 an acre. If you add the regen roadmap on top of that, it's $8 an acre. So just trying to, add a little bit of extra value there, make sure that you can walk through the process of implementing these practices and do it in a successful way.
Hell yeah. All right, and then we have another question from Josh that he put into the chat here, and
Yeah.
he says he's not taking it easy on us. So again, appreciate you, Josh. So the Biden administration may change rules for sustainable aviation fuel regarding ethanol. The change deals with penalizing farmers' land converting to corn production. How does that affect existing cropland currently being used for corn? Carolyn,
Yeah.
do you want me to take that, or do you have some insight on that one?
I have a little bit. We'll see if you can add anything onto it.
You start, and I'll see what I
Okay.
can add to it.
Okay. Josh, the answer is we don't know yet. There has been some conversation this week, and we've seen quite a bit of it on what these potential new rules could be. And yeah, there is a little bit in there that says if there's been a land use change in order to start row cropping, there could be a penalty because of that. Now, what we don't know is that actually happening? What does that look like? How long ago does the land use change have to be? Obviously, it's important to note that pretty much everywhere we're farming today was not farmed at one point in time. Not all of it was not. So a land use change has happened in every place. Like they can't look back 200 years and expect this to work. So there's going to be a lot of thought, I think, that needs to go into this piece in order to make it a proper rule that doesn't end up hurting everyone in the long run. But we don't have much information beyond what you put in the chat here. Justin, do you have any further
Yeah,
thoughts?
I'm not 100% sure about this, but I believe a lot of I know that in the last few weeks there's been a bunch of stuff coming out about how there's new rules that are going to penalize farmers and stuff, and that's been the buzzwords. I think it actually has a lot more to do with the 40B. I'm going to say 40B tax credit. I'm not 100% sure on the numbers because there's a lot of them, but I think it's more related to the 40B tax credit that is specifically for sustainable aviation fuel. If you're a sustainable aviation fuel plant, you kind of have options on which route you want to go to actually earn tax credits. Now, you can only earn one tax credit at a time, but you kind of figure out what's going to be the best route for you to go. I mean, at the end of the day, guys, like if you kind of pay attention to the economic and political environment around, all right, Josh confirms it is related to 40B. If you kind of pay attention to the economic and political environment around us right now, I mean, there's a big push for how can we transition to more cleaner energy and that kind of stuff. I mean, they're not going to make it difficult for that transition to happen. The concept of penalizing people and making it harder to accomplish one of the primary goals of this administration, I like that. Just on a macro level, I don't think that makes sense to me. So if you hear buzzwords or people making a big deal out of, oh, well, we're really going to try to cripple farmers because they're growing corn, like, well, I don't think so, not in this space at least, because the ultimate goal here is to encourage energy output that has a cleaner impact on the environment. So if farmers are a key part of that, and they're going to be, I don't foresee any actual movements being made to severely cripple them. So I think what Josh is alluding to is a little bit more related to 40B, which I am not at all an expert on. But I think that that's a little bit different arena than when we're talking about 45Z tax credits, which is this whole carbon intensity space that we're referring to.
Yeah, 40B is just sustainable aviation fuel for right now, and it is happening for the 2024 year. The 45Z tax credits don't start until January 1st, 2025. When that happens on January 1st, 40B gets rolled up into 45Z that we're talking about. So 40B is kind of happening in the meantime. It's important for us to pay attention to what's going on with 40B, because we think a lot of the rules and groundwork that's laid for that will kind of make its way into the 45Z rules. But then, yeah, it will become one starting January 1st, 2025, which will be good for all of us. Not so many things to remember.
This is why Carolyn's around here. She knows things. All right. We've got a couple of minutes here, and I don't think we have any other questions to answer, but Carolyn, maybe we want to just go through. I think a lot of people are familiar with our products. We can run a CI score for people. We can do the CI certification subscription. We can do the regen roadmap subscription, but maybe if you want to give just a quick rundown of each of those things, like what is actually delivered as part of those products, which is, you and your team are responsible for. So if there's anybody that knows, it's going to be you. So maybe that would be a good way to sort of end this talk here.
Yeah, we'll see if I can do it in 2 minutes. So CI certification is, of course, the primary thing that we talk about on these CI Chit Chats. Essentially, with CI certification, we are trying to get you to the point of having those certified bushels so that you can take those to the ethanol plant and earn that premium on top of your regular payment just for having a lower CI score. So the process for CI certification is, once you sign up with us, we assign you an agronomist. That agronomist will gather all of your field boundaries and help get everything put into topsoil. And then from there, they gather all of the data that happens on the field throughout the year. So every single pass that goes across the field during that crop year needs to be documented. What that looks like is, of course, gathering like the date that the event happened, the rate of, fertilizer or seeding or whatever. And then also the shape files or spread maps or evidence that that event actually happened. So it could be invoices, like I said, shape files, spread maps. There's a couple different options, but we have to verify that everything that you said happened and went onto that field actually happened with those pieces of evidence. So after we get everything collected, we will essentially package all that information up and send it on to a third-party verifier. Right now, we are working with eco-engineers out of Des Moines. They'll be our primary people for that verification, and they'll help us put that all together for you, give you the official stamp of approval, and then you'll be able to take that to the ethanol plant and earn that premium. We're already at 8:15, but I'll kind of, like I already gave a little bit of an insight to Regen Roadmap, so I'll dig into that one a little more and then we can let you guys go. It wouldn't be a CI Chit Chat if we didn't run over. That's what Mitchell would do if he was here, so we have to.
Okay.
But yeah, Regen Roadmap. So we talked about it a little bit already on how can you lower your CI score. We offer a service, the Regen Roadmap. We've had that for a couple of years now, so even before CI. And essentially the Regen Roadmap is just to help you implement soil health practices. So we do a monthly check-in with you to walk through what do we recommend for your farm? How do you implement it? What exactly do you need to do? And then we also have a couple longer meetings a year, one in the summer and one in the winter time, to plan for what's coming for the crop year and then to review what happened. So essentially, we just want to be there to kind of hold your hand, guide you through the process, especially if you're new to these practices. We want to make sure that you implement them successfully, because again, if you do that, you can earn an even higher payment from the 45Z.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Dennis had one last question roll in. I think we can answer pretty quick. Dennis, clocking. So there's only one. He's saying there's only one sustainable aviation fuel plant. I'm not sure if you're saying in general or in Iowa. Are there more in the works? Great question, Dennis. Don't really know the answer. I know that this whole sustainable aviation fuel is something a lot more. Okay, he says in the U.S. Something that there's probably going to be a lot more popping up of. We'll see how that works out. But yeah, just keep your eye on it. But as far as everybody else, appreciate you stopping in and joining us this morning, and hope you have a good rest of the day. And send us some more questions throughout the week, and we'll certainly get back to you next week. But thanks, everybody. Have a good one.